Not yet. Hey, now we're live. Once again, I need an intro video. I blamed Tribe on that on Saturday, actually, before the slate talk. But welcome to Mondays with McCool. My name is James McCool. I am the owner of PaterDFS.com, and today we are going to be going over the NFL DFS Week 12, as well as some other shenanigans, which I'm sure that we'll get into. I am joined once again by Jordan Cooper, Blender HG. I was joined by Adam last week because Jordan decided that he had much more important things to handle last Monday than hang out and talk shit with me. So welcome back again, Blender. How you doing?
Fine. I had a successful Sunday, so I'm fine. I mean, I make money. It's not like I won like a tournament or anything, but cash games on both sides, and I ended up hitting a 3 touchdown parlay boost thing on DraftKings for $2,200.
Oh, that's pretty good. There you go. That's pretty good.
Well, I mean, you always use your promos and boosts from the sportsbooks, even if they're stuff you normally would not bet on.
Yeah.
But it's like, 50% profit boost. You know, I took Keenan Allen, I took Cortland Sutton, I took Saquon Barkley. Right. Plus 310, plus 165, minus 160, plus the boost. It was like 2,200 or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we take that. I think that, a lot of the time I talk about the boosts. There's one guy in the Discord named Gugs who we just rail on constantly about being a degenerate. But, he gets the bad, better boosts of what we always call them. It's like, oh, we'll give you like $10,000 rake free on this bet. And we're just like, I get $100 rake free whenever I get that promo. You know, we always make fun of him for that, but he's right to take them. And most people should be right to take those promos. I remember you once saying the way that you should take a lot of these boosts is on longer shots. Are you still following that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're the anytime touchdown parlay. It was just at least 3, right? You needed to. It was one of those types of sometimes like, oh, you get a boost on any SGP with 4 legs or more at minimum plus 400.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, I mean, I could satisfy it up to there, but when it's the straight parlays, when it's stuff that I would normally be betting on, then I don't mind doing like 8, 10 leg or whatever, just like everything that, stuff that I have already, because I already know the bets in and of themselves are plus EV.
Yeah.
When it's like stuff that I normally don't bet on, it's just like, I'm just going to line shop and find the biggest discrepancies where DraftKings has the best number in market and then take the bare minimum on that, because I can't be guaranteed that those are even good bets. Right. Anytime touchdown markets are one-way markets. They're typically not good bets in general. Typically, they're not going to be off enough to satisfy, the 18% hold they put on those markets. So that's why I just did 3 of them, right? But I'm looking for longer shots. I'm not putting in 3 minus 200s. I'm just like Keenan Allen was plus 310. And the only reason I took it because on other sites, he was like plus 200, plus 220. I'm like, plus 310. Okay. Giving him, so unreasonable. I mean, you could go and you could find plus 3,000s, but, having the 6th wide receiver and the 4th tight end and, the 3rd running back, guys that are going to get 4 snaps. I'm not going to put, 3 plus 2,200s together. It's going to be somewhere within reason that the guy could actually score a touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And touchdown markets are just so popular. I always try to say, especially with home run markets as well, I think that home run markets can be exploited like kind of sometimes. I think the touchdown markets are like, you're just doing it because you think that it's fun. Most of the time the EV there is minimal at best. And with the variance there, I think
so sometimes they could be James. Sometimes they could be off if there's a playing time considerations. I mean, that there have been ones where we had one that I took an ATD1 as a straight bet on the week where Ramondre Stevenson, people thought that he was like done, and Antonio Gibson was going to be like the starter, and like his touchdown prop was like plus 260 as a running back. And I'm just like, well, what happens if Ramondre Stevenson is still fine, right? That they're, and he scored a touchdown, and he should have been like plus 120 to score instead of plus 260. Like those situations are different, right? But I'm just talking about in general that typically you're not going to be able to make up for the hold in the market. You're not going to find one that is so vastly off without those types of situations where you need to determine, well, if this isn't the case, then this number is totally off.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So you had an okay week in cash. I thought the cash was. This is kind of a weird week in cash. I didn't think that it was quite as straightforward as it had been in weeks past. I thought that there were a couple like very clear options that you should probably be utilizing. I thought that there were some other spots that, at quarterback, like I think that there was a decision to be made between like Anthony Richardson and Geno Smith. And then I think at tight end, there wasn't like a clear tight end that we should be utilizing. So how did you go about it in cash?
Well, I play cash on both FanDuel and DraftKings, and I purposely try to make my lineups different if possible. Right? Now, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just like what I think is the best lineup is the best lineup. So on DraftKings, I played a popular team. To me, the key decision on DraftKings was, are you going to pay up or down a tight end? To me, that was either you're playing Luke Schoonmaker or you're playing Travis Kelce. And I'm playing, I sided in general. This is how I decide in general. The teams that are going to score a bunch of touchdowns, I play more of those players when in doubt. So my cash team on DraftKings was Richardson at quarterback. Played 3 running backs. I played Achane, Hunt, and Brian Robinson. Then my receivers were Sutton, Myers, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then the Bears defense. But if you wanted to go play Ridley instead of one of those wide receivers, if you wanted to play Connor Henry, Hunter Henry at tight end, if you played Geno Smith at quarterback, and if you played the Buccaneers defense, or the Broncos defense, the Dolphins defense, or the Bears defense, those were all totally viable. On FanDuel, however, I purposely played Geno Smith instead of Anthony Richardson. On FanDuel, my team was Geno Smith at quarterback. Then I played Connor, Hunt, and Jacobs with the Packers defense. And okay. my tight end was Hunter Henry. And my receivers were AJ Brown with no Devonta Smith, and he was 8,500. Calvin Ridley and Michael Pittman. So because Cortland Sutton was a little bit more money, 7,100 on FanDuel. Jacoby Myers was more of a value on DraftKings than he was on FanDuel. And I try to avoid playing Raiders when I can. And you needed a cheap wide receiver, and it was between like Pittman or like Odunze, something like that. And I decided that if I'm going to play Pittman on FanDuel, well, he's tied to Anthony Richardson. So I'll play Geno Smith on FanDuel. So I have the negative correlation, the lack of correlation in case Anthony Richardson busts. But Anthony Richardson I have on DraftKings. So it's like, if Anthony Richardson does well and Pittman puts up 20 fantasy points, I'm making up those points that the A-rich teams on FanDuel are getting anyway because I have Pittman. And it's not like Pittman was that on. I think in cash games he came in at 14, 15% owned in cash games. So that's kind of how I didn't play Ridley on my DraftKings lineup, but I had him on my FanDuel lineup. Right? I had Sutton on DraftKings, but I didn't have him on FanDuel. Some people played the Connor team on DraftKings. Well, I had Connor on FanDuel, so I'm fine with Connor doing well also. So I have Hunter Henry on FanDuel, not Kelce. So it kind of, I try to make it so these lineups I would like to play on their own, but given the 2v2 choice, because I could have played a Sutton lineup on FanDuel, but my Sutton lineup would have look practically the same as my DraftKings lineup, and I like to do both. So yeah. So FanDuel was easy. FanDuel, I was already like before the Sunday night game with AJ Brown, I was way over the line as it is.
Yeah.
So it really didn't even matter. So
Yeah.
But on DraftKings, I got like the last payout spot and a lot of double ups, like just like right at the 137 point, something like that, like right at the end. But yeah, when Sutton, Myers, and JSN all do pretty well, that'll happen.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those slates where I think that Cortland Sutton was one of those plays that when we were looking at the slate overall, there were a whole bunch of guys in that mid-range of 5K to 6K on DraftKings that just were going to get massive ownership. And we see it. I mean, we even see it in what came through. I did not have Kareem Hunt projected for 47% ownership, but knew that he would be the most popular player on the slate. But Kareem Hunt, Brian Robinson, Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, there were some other mid 5K guys. Travis Kelce is one of them if you want to include tight end. Like all these guys were going to get some ownership. Calvin Ridley was projected to get some ownership as well. He was 5,700. All those guys were projected to get ownership. And the way that we kind of looked at it was any of these guys could fail. The one that I felt the best about was Cortland Sutton because he'd basically been like the wide receiver 5 for the last 4 weeks. But he's still attached to a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix that absolutely could turn into a pumpkin at any moment. And Jacoby Myers is a Raider. Like you said, you don't like playing Raiders. And Calvin Ridley has Will Levis. And, all these guys, Brian Robinson is in a timeshare. Kareem Hunt is on the Chiefs. Like all of these guys could fail. It was an interesting week, though, where even recognizing that, I still looked at them and I was like, well, where else am I going to go? Really? I tried to figure out ways to get away from a lot of these guys. And I did in the one GPP lineup that I built, but I still had Kareem Hunt and I still had, like relatively popular players around him. I did end up going with Josh Jacobs at running back with the Green Bay Packers defense, which I thought was a really, really good play. A little bit higher owned than I thought that he was going to be, but I thought that was a pretty solid play. If Devon Achan, whatever, I don't know how to pronounce his name. People keep making
thought Jacobs was high on. Jacobs was 8% owned in the Millie. He was like not even the 10th highest owned running back.
No, but I had him projected a little bit lower. Just a note. I thought that he was a good play as well. Running backs this week though were it was actually a week where you did need to play certain running backs to win. This was not the typical running back week that we have talked about. You needed to play like a small handful of guys or you were just going to get shot. If you didn't play, Josh Jacobs, you weren't winning GPPs. Bucky Irving was a really, really good play at 5,300. The models paid it really liked him. But he even still came in at like 9%. I was pretty shocked that he came in at 9%. I had him projected like 5%.
That's not high. That's fine.
Well, but I mean, it's still so in the contest sims, I had him for an efficient ownership of like 13% or something. So if he comes in at 10% when I thought that he was going to be 5%, like, yeah, I'm still happy that I have him, but it does start to reduce that edge a little bit. And with guys who, if you have somebody projected for, say, 10% owned, Kareem Hunt is the most extreme example. At 30% owned, he was a fine play. At 47% owned, he was probably an awful play. And those swings are much more significant. But I mean, it still matters. Like if you're doubling the ownership of a player, it's super extreme in showdown. But even
then you're off on the ownership, James. I mean, that's like I don't know what you expected. Like Bucky Irving was 9%. I actually thought he was underowned. I thought he would be more owned than that. I thought Jacobs would be more owned than that. That's why it's like Jacobs for 12, 13% ownership. So I'm like 8%. I'm happy, right? I'm like I didn't play Bucky. I thought Bucky Irving was going to be overowned.
I did have Josh Jacobs 13% ownership. You're right.
Okay, so yeah, so when he comes in at 8, that there you go.
We're happy.
Right, so that's why I look at why is Tyrone Tracy 11% owned? What are people doing?
Yeah, that one is.
I mean, some of this stuff is like Tyrone Tracy. I had it like 3-4%. And he comes in at 11. I'm not saying that I was going to play him, right? Everyone else, I mean, it looks fairly. I mean, it's the Hunt and the Robinson ownership is out of hand. I had Achane higher on. I had Achane. I thought Achane was going to be 30% owned. He came in at 23. So I played less of it. I played 7 GPP lineups. I only played Achane in 2 out of 7 because I actually thought he was going to be a bit over-owned. And I played more of Jacobs and Mixon. And Mixon came in at around 15. And I know I thought he would be low. I'd been a little bit lower than that, but not absurdly lower. But yeah, you're right that I mean, you needed 40 points total at running back to compete in GPPs, and you didn't get them from the chalkier running backs. I mean, you had to go and find them elsewhere. The way that I approach GPPs, James, I typically don't. I prioritized correlation and double stacks and run backs more this week for wide receiver. Key point is for wide receiver. So like I have played a Geno Smith double stack. A lot of times when I play double stacks, I'll play a wide receiver and a tight end to free up a wide receiver slot that has a ceiling that's a one-off from some other team, right? I typically would play, instead of playing Geno, JSN, Metcalf, I would play something like Geno plus one of them plus AJ Barner, or just with one of them, and then use another wide receiver spot. And then that wide receiver spot, I'd be playing Jaden Reed or something, just a one-off guy from some other game. Because, unless the team puts up, 42 plus points, a lot of times 2 wide receiver double stacks with 2 6K plus wide receivers just doesn't score enough. The thing on this slate is that the wide receiver position had no value. Like everyone was like efficient, like it was fine. Like the wide receiver pricing was like, if you're paying X dollars, you're getting about X production. So being that that's the case, plugging in any reasonable wide receiver out of like 30 doesn't really change the amount of points that you get from a median standpoint. So if that's the case, I'm just going to use correlation as the boost, because I could, like, any 3 wide receivers I put together will fulfill their salary requirement as long as I'm not playing garbage, right? As long as I'm playing reasonably projected players. So I played a Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, a Vele lineup, 2 wide receiver double stack. For that, I played this wasn't a double stack wide receiver, but I played a Jaden Daniels, Noah Brown, Zach Ertz lineup. And in a lot of these lineups, I'm playing a guy from like the other side of the game, or 2 guys from the other side of the game. I'm playing Drake May, Hunter Henry, Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, that type of lineup. Because to me, from the projections, like the value positions were everything other than wide receiver.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not going to correlate a tight end and give up three points in projection when I could just take the 4K wide receiver that's the same price as the tight end, and then play a Luke Schoonmaker at 2,500, or play a Trey McBride at 5,600 as a one-off, and stuff like that. So to me, that was the main strategic point of the slate, other than just having to predict that Brian Robinson gets hurt, then ruins my best line. The lineups that I have that came the closest to doing well, like in 170s, had Brian Robinson's three damn points in it, right? It's like, but the thing is that it's not like I was playing any other running back below that price. So it's like, what else would I have had in that spot? Like nothing. Right. I mean, there's nothing there to begin with.
No, you should have played Bucky Irving. That's who you should have played.
I purposely didn't play Bucky Irving because he was getting steamed, and I'm like, no, I think I actually thought Bucky Irving would come out of the Brian Robinson and the Kareem Hunt ownership. And in fact, people just said, no, we're just going to play all of these 5K running backs and screw trying to do that at receiver and stuff like that. So, I misjudged that. Yeah, I mean, I could have played Bucky Irving instead of Brian Robinson and go up at defense. I mean, that was perfectly viable. But, when you're playing a Vele Knicks lineups, when you're playing when you're playing who else did I play? When you're playing Kyler Murray, Harrison, McBride lineups, it's like what am I doing? Why don't I just play Hunt and Robinson in these lineups? Because like I'm getting a couple of single digit owned guys already. So what do I have to change? And turns out Harrison was actually a little bit more owned than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah, well, people overprojected that Arizona Seattle game. And I don't know if I should say overprojected, but there were high projections on that Seattle Arizona game, and people get pulled up, especially when Geno Smith. Everybody wants to play Seattle stack and Arizona stack, so it makes sense.
How about Tyreek Hill? Tyreek Hill was supposed to be the leverage play on Achane. Apparently, everyone did that.
Well,
that's why Achane's ownership was lower than I thought. I thought Achane would be 30 and Tyreek would be 12. And it turns out Achane was 23 and Tyreek was 21, and he was the second highest owned wide receiver. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell's going on? Did everyone have the same idea as me? I guess so.
Well, everybody's using the same sims as you that said that Tyreek Hill was a leverage off of Devon Kane. That is one of the consequences of contest sims and like that third, fourth level thinking now is like, okay, well, the projections say this, and then everybody says, oh, well, the contest sims say this, so we're gonna get away from him and play him, and it's just so hard to catch. I thought that this week was, from a wide receiver standpoint, it was the pricing was soft on DraftKings this week, so you could kind of build however you wanted to build for the most part. I thought that there were enough value running backs and like mid-range guys that you were going to be able to play whoever you really wanted. And that was one of the other reasons why Tyreek Hill ended up getting pushed up, was because like it wasn't hard to have a $7,200 Tyreek Hill. So having him made a lot of sense. I think I wasn't surprised that people had as much Amon-Ra St. Brown as they did. I projected him high. But like as I was building, I was also kind of thinking to myself, are people really going to want to play $8,300 Amon-Ra St. Brown when they have Tyreek Hill here, when they have, Nico Collins, Jackson Smith? Like I kind of thought that he would drop a little bit. He didn't drop. He ended up not being a, not shit play anyway. But the way that I wanted to look at the slate was say, okay, I think that the running back chalk is fine. And most of the chalk I thought was fine. Like I didn't have any problems really with any of the chalk overall when I was doing the slate write-up. So I decided that I would rather just get a little bit weird with my stacks and not eat a lot of the ownership at the stacks. So what I wanted to do was focus on plays like Miami, focus on plays like, which ended up being popular, egg on my face. But I wanted to focus on Miami. I wanted to focus on Denver. I wanted to focus on Las Vegas, which was ultra cheap. And Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers both projected super well. I wanted to get different at my stack and then mostly just surround it with ownership. That didn't work out super well this week. Like it was okay. It didn't work out super well. I did cash. I ended up going with an Indianapolis stack with Anthony Richardson and Josh Downs, which looked terrific on the first drive and then did literally nothing else for the rest of the game. This was just another one of those weeks where I thought the ownership made sense, and I was fine with eating a lot of the chalk on wide receivers. You mentioned that. So go for it.
Did you think Josh Downs was going to be 14% owned?
No, I didn't.
Right.
That was the problem.
Thing, like 6,200. No, the thing that, the funny part is that everyone in GPPs, everyone, Jacoby Myers was in everyone's double up lineups, or everyone's double up lineups, 5,100. He's the first guy you take out and go, well, I'm not playing this guy in GPP. And it seems like everyone did that, right? Because like Cortland Sutton, no one had a problem with, right? 21% owned, right? No one had a problem with JSN, 19% owned. No one had a problem with some of the Calvin Ridley, 14% owned, right? No one had a problem with those. Jacoby, no, we can't play 8.9% owned. It's like Jacoby Myers in every projection set that I looked at was the highest point per dollar wide receiver value on the slate at 5,100. And people looked at that and goes, yeah, it's Jacoby Myers. He's going He's going to score me that a nice 15, 16 points. And why do I need him in GPP? And of course, he scores 25 instead in 8.9% ownership, right? Turns out that what I said, I didn't play it. See, this is the type of thing. You do a show on Wednesday and on Friday, and you say something, and then you decide not to do it because there are better options, and you don't need to. I said that I thought Caleb Williams, with how cheap the Bears receivers were, that I would not play any of the Bears receivers by themselves, but I would play a double stack of Caleb Williams. That if you're gonna play DJ Moore, you're gonna play DJ Moore with Keenan Allen in a Caleb Williams stack, and you're probably gonna play Keenan Allen plus Moore, Keenan Allen plus Adunze, because just they're gonna pass so much, and the stack is cheap, and we have no wide receiver value. I mean, like, play whatever the hell wide receivers you want, and they all projected fine. No one at wide receiver projected great, like for their salary. But I'm like, everyone's within like 1 point of their salary adjusted value, so like you could play anyone. So I just thought it was a good idea to play a Caleb Williams stack if you're going to play Bears. And then on Sunday morning, I'm like, why am I doing that when I could just play? Like I just look at some of the ownership and I go, why not? I could just play Geno doubles or Jaden Daniels and Tua.
Yeah,
I'm just going through like I played Drake May over Caleb Williams, and I just never got to it. It's not. I mean, it's not like that would have been the winning lineup. But I mean, from an ownership standpoint, I mean, if I go to the Bears.
Yeah,
Bears were like none owned. I mean, Rome Odunze was and Chicago defense were the most owned. They had the least amount of points. Caleb Williams at 29, DJ Moore 29, Keenan Allen 23, and DJ Moore was 8.9% owned. Keenan Allen was 1.2% owned, and Caleb Williams was 2.5% owned. Like, there's your vomit stat. The thing is that had I built that lineup, I would have had Brian Robinson, Kareem Hunt, Devon Achane in that lineup, right? I mean, it's not like I would have won. I probably would have had Cortland Sutton in that lineup, and I would have had a dud or two. I'd maybe pay up for Kelsey at tight end. And I'm patting myself on the back that, this lineup probably would have cashed, but it's not like I would have won.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you could have built that with JSN and then a bring back of Trey McBride. And like, you probably would have ended up having a really, really good finish.
I would have won the Millie if I done that, right? Right.
Well,
that would have been my Jacobs Hunt team. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I would have played Bucky Irvin, right? We had all I did. All I had to do is go this way in the 6v6. I would have won all the money.
All I'm saying is that you could have done it with a Chicago stack. Like, there were ways that you could have put it together.
Yes.
I want to point out this comment really quick. Jacoby Slappy's got lucky with garbage time points. Let's be real. Those catches could have easily gone to Bowers. I didn't realize garbage time points count less than regular time points.
They should have a fourth. They should give you less points then. You said it's garbage time, so you get. They should show that in the game. Garbage time. Did Brock Bowers got 7 million targets and only caught like 3 passes or something? That's what happens when you're attached to quarterbacks that suck, and it's the Raiders. What are we doing?
So, but let's like talk about it from an algorithmic standpoint. Like, yeah, those probably could have gone to Bowers, but the point is they're not going to anybody but Jacoby Myers or Bowers. Like, that target share is so condensed. It's so condensed that even with a team total of 17.75, the Raiders projected as like the 3rd highest median stack for me, because Brock Bowers projected for like 17 and Jacoby Myers projected for 16. And then, Gardner Minshew is going to project as like, he project for like 13 or 14 fantasy points. So, yeah, you're right. They could have gone to Bowers, but they didn't. And the week before, all of the targets that went to Bowers could have gone to Jacoby Myers, but they didn't. The point is that the median between those two is very high for where they were priced. You could argue that both Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers were $1,000 underpriced this week. And next week, Brock Bowers will continue to be $1,500 underpriced. Jacoby Myers probably going to be higher priced next week, but probably not by much because the ownership was so low.
Is there anyone else we have to take away their points for being garbage time?
I don't know how many players got there in garbage time. Who got there really in garbage time? I guess like all of Dallas and Washington.
The Dallas defense, DST, got there in garbage time. Because of course, James, I don't blame the guy because I watched it live on Red Zone when it happened. That special teams players probably aren't in the meeting when the offensive players or defensive players are told that at this portion of the game you just fall down and you win the game, right? So when they do the onside kick and he just runs, he catches the ball and just scoots right by the entire defense, he should be just fall down. There's 14 seconds left and the other team doesn't have any timeouts. You fall down, you win the game. And of course he scores a touchdown. So the DSD for the Cowboys, because Turpin scored on a punt return or a kickoff return. So Cowboys
99 yards or something, yeah.
Right. That to me, that's garbage time. Returning an onside kick for a touchdown at the very end of the game. Like, come on, that's garbage.
That should count as half points. But the point is here, like Jacoby Myers was a great play because he was underpriced for his median outcome. He had a ceiling outcome of 25.1 fantasy points. I would say that's between 1 and 2 standard deviations away from his median. He had a ceiling outcome for sure. Like he ran hot. Same thing as Bucky Irving. Like Bucky Irving, his median outcome, I think I projected him for like 13 fantasy points. He ends up scoring 26. That's a second standard deviation outcome. And you run hot. But like the point is that you're trying to find guys who over time, not in this game, but over time are going to be underpriced for the production that they can give. Right. So Jacoby Myers.
And also the point is that like what I mentioned before, Jacoby Myers came in at 8.9%.
Right.
He was under-owned in GP. Like regardless, I mean, for his range of outcomes, he should have been 16% owned. I mean, like he should have been somewhere around there. And he wasn't. So truthfully, Jacoby Myers was an excellent GPP play, right? In a vacuum, obviously, at 5,100. If you thought he was going to be 9% owned. But I mean, we've seen time and time again that sometimes, these guys are 22% owned, and it's like, okay, well, that's probably shouldn't be 22% owned, and he scores 16 points, and it's like, you could have had him. It's like, you throw up your arms. It's like, it doesn't really matter that much. So yeah, like if he came in at 25% owned, then you'd be like, okay, then fine. Then we'd be complaining he got there in garbage time, right?
Right.
Then we'd be complaining. But I mean, like at 9% owned, he's like, dude, Tyreek Hill was over-owned.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And you go, well, Tyreek Hill has this, but Tyreek Hill has a ceiling and blah, blah. Yeah, but he shouldn't be 21% owned. He didn't be. It's not like he projected, like, dude, CeeDee Lamb out-projected him. Mm-hmm. Like, and almost every projection set I saw, CeeDee Lamb for $100 more was like 1.5 or 2 points higher projected than Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I had CeeDee Lamb projected for 17.28 and Tyreek Hill projected for 14.64.
Okay.
2.5 points.
Go. No one wanted to play CeeDee Lamb on a garbage Cowboys team that won.
That is only going to throw to CeeDee Lamb.
Some of those balls don't get to CeeDee Lamb. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's what, A dot with Cooper Rush is like what, 3.5 yards. He's Wan'Dale Robinson.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I'm sure it's terrible. I haven't looked yet this morning, but I'm sure it's just trash. But the point on Jacoby Myers, I had him projected for 17% owned, 17.3%. In small field, I had him projected for like 19. All right, so I had him projected relatively high. This is from the article that I wrote, the Week 12 Thoughts and Notes. Jacoby Myers at 17% owned was still 12% under owned. Like I had his efficient ownership at 30% owned. So for him to come in at
this is a small field ownership.
Yeah, this is small field. So when I ran the contest sims for small field, he was 12% underowned at 17% projected ownership. When he comes in at 9% owned, he is a third of his efficient ownership in small field. Like, you should take advantage of that. That's really, really nice. So it's just when we talk about guys who are underowned or overowned, that's what we're talking about here. There's a certain level of equilibrium and like optimal ownership. And if somebody is projected for less than that, then we should look to use them to some extent in our lineups. If they're more than that, then we should look to have less of them to some extent in our lineups. Not none of them. I will be clear on that because people misconstrue that sometimes when they see that somebody is overowned. They're like, I can't play that guy. You absolutely can. You just have to build it right. Somebody who's overowned can cancel out that guy who's overowned. Right. So, like, that's the way it comes together. In fact, Jacoby Myers and Tyreek Hill at the beginning, like before the cards flipped, and we didn't know that Tyreek Hill was going to be 21% owned. If we thought that Tyreek Hill was going to be 14% owned and his ownership is efficient, and we pair him with Jacoby Myers, in that moment, we think that we have a nice combo that is underowned mainly because of Jacoby Myers. And then when the cards flip, if you didn't have Tyreek Hill with Jacoby Myers, Tyreek Hill was a worse play because he was higher owned. But pairing them together, Tyreek Hill would cancel out his overowned with Jacoby Myers underowned. And then you have a neutral play with a combo of players. That's the way that I think about it, at least.
I have another question for you. I know defense is whatever the hell.
Yeah.
What happened? How did Tampa Bay end up being the fourth highest owned defense, and a $3,200 Bronco defense was 18% owned? Like, what? I mean, like, I had the Tampa Bay defense as the highest raw point projected defense on the entire slate at 3,300, and the clear, like, if you're playing a defense, you're probably playing the Bucs against Tommy DeVito. I thought there would be super, super chalk. And like, if anyone's going to be similar owned, it was going to be the Packers with, Brandon Allen playing at 2,800, because obviously the pricing came out after the whatever that Purdy was out. But like, the Broncos defense was only 100 less than 10. What, everyone didn't have the $100 to go up to the Tampa Bay defense? I mean, like, that can't be. I mean, I'm not saying that the Broncos defense was like bad or anything, but I was under the auspices that the Buccaneers defense would be the 18% owned defense, and the Broncos would be the 8% owned defense, and vice versa. And Chicago obviously was going to be like the popular cheap defense.
Right.
I mean, I know the defensive ownership is spread out enough that it doesn't matter. It's just that I was more shocked that Tampa Bay wasn't like clearly like, oh, the $3,300 Tampa Bay defense at 20+% owned. If you're playing a lineup that has, 2 6% owned players in it, yeah, throw in the Tampa Bay defense. But if you're not, then you should have played the Broncos. And it seemed like it was the opposite, right? I mean, it's kind of like what Ed says in the chat of like with Myers. It's the same, similar types of things of like a guy based on initial projections looks underowned, but everyone sees that, so they play more of them, and then they end up being overowned because everyone thought the ownership was going to be the opposite, right? Like, like everyone goes, I'm using the proverbial everyone, quote unquote. Oh, well, everyone's going to play the Tampa Bay defense, so I'm going to play the Broncos. And then you flip over the cards, and the Broncos are twice as owned as the Bucs because everyone went different at defense, because why not go different at defense? And then it turns out that you should have just stayed with the Buccaneers defense because they were.
But the other problem with that logic is people usually don't pivot at defense. We usually see defense this year above 20% on the highest owned defense of the week. So, like, there wasn't any reason for people to get off the Tampa Bay defense and go to the Broncos defense, especially. Well, actually, I think what happened was people looked at Jacoby Myers, got off of him from cash GPPs, and then said, oh, well, if I think Jacoby Myers sucks, I might as well play the Denver Broncos defense. But it also goes back to, how on earth did Tyrone Tracy end up 10% owned?
Well, the Giants because with DeVito at quarterback, they're going to have to run the ball 400 times.
Dude, it's so
And
so weird, man.
it's weird. Devin Singletary is the one that had the touchdown.
It was a weird week in this regard. This Tyrone Tracy. This is the weirdest thing that I think happened this week is the Tyrone Tracy ownership.
The ownership,
because
I mean, if you go down the list, I mean, Josh Downs being 14% on, but I at least there's a reason for that because I know A-Rich was going to be the most popular quarterback, even though
sure.
It's hard to attach him to people, whatever. Okay, I get that. But yeah, I scrolled down like this morning. I was like, okay, let's see anything that's totally odd. Yeah, we mentioned some of the main kind of ones that are a little bit, and I just scrolled down. I go, Tyrone Tracy, 11%. What?
Yeah.
What happened there?
That's the weirdest shit. It doesn't like there's not a heuristic. There's not a projection thing. There's not a value. Somebody had to have like pushed it hard, I guess. I have no idea how that.
It's not like he was cheap. Like if you told me that Amir Abdullah came in at 18% owned, I would have been okay. I get it. It's the $4,300 running back on a team that may not have more than one running back and whatever. And the odd point, Amir Abdullah acted as the bell cow for the Raiders. Had we have known that Amir Abdullah, the career third down specialist, like nowhere near bell cow, whatever, was going to get like 95% of the snaps, even for the Raiders at 4,300, he would have been in my cash lineup probably over Brian Robinson.
Yeah. Let's see. I had him projected really like pretty well. I had him projected as the second overall best value on the slate behind Devon, ahead of Kareem Hunt. But like somebody asked me about him in the Discord. They're like, "Are we doing this Amir Abdullah thing?" I'm like, I don't know why you need to. Like we have really good options with Kane and Hunt and Connor, and we have Bucky Irving if you need value. Like I don't know why I was going to
and Brian Robinson was fine. I mean,
and Brian Robinson was fine. Yeah, Brian Robinson was fine.
Brian Robinson was absolutely fine. Of course, he gets injured in the first half, then comes back, plays some more, and then just sits out the second half. So I mean, it's that's just the run out. I mean, it's just that's the run out you get.
You have Josh Jacobs, you have David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, I didn't know why we would need to go down to Amir Abdullah, and I guess the answer is that they were just going to use him as a bell cow against one of the better defenses. And that's the weird thing. Like you just said, if Amir Abdullah ended up 18% owned, I think that makes sense because it's 4,300. But functionally, him and Tyrone Tracy were exactly the same play. But you had to pay $1,700 more for Tyrone Tracy. So how did people end up on Tyrone freaking Tracy? That doesn't make any sense. That's really silly. All right. Well,
and I just sorted by the top the highest scoring players on the slate by points, not including quarterbacks. Highest scoring player on the slate was Jordan Addison.
Yep.
1.5% owned. Josh Jacobs, 8.8% owned. Jalen Waddle, the people were playing the Dolphins, 4.9% owned. DJ Moore, 8.9% owned. And then you get to Cortland Sutton, 21.6% owned. Trey McBride, 9.6% owned. Bucky Irving, 8.9% owned. Jacoby Myers, 8.9% owned. I mean, like Tony Pollard, 4.1%. I mean, like,
yeah.
Like you didn't need Jordan. Like you didn't need Jordan. Like the point is that like when so many of the top scorers are like this low owned, it's not like you needed all of them. Like if you played a Tua stack with Jalen Waddle and Jonnu Smith, with Bucky Irving and Josh Jacobs, like you don't need Addison in that lot. Like you would have won the Millie without Addison. Like you don't need, like sometimes you literally don't need, like you don't need all of these people. And that's the main reason why, that you use simulations and projections and stuff where, as we talk about in the theory of DFS course, it's always a balance of projection, correlation, and leverage. It's not just all leverage. It's like, I'm just going to play all 5% on guys and have my projection be like 27 points below everyone else's. Like it's not correlation. I'm going to play I'm going to play 6 Lions in my lineup. It's going to be Jared Goff, Williams, Tim Patrick. I'm like, it's not that. Like, it's a big mix of all 3 of those things. And like, even in the cases where multiple single-digit owned guys do well, you don't. The likelihood that there's a combination of all of them in a lineup is very low. You're not going to need them all.
What
do you have on the screen?
This was a subscriber's $100,000 win yesterday, going over exactly what you just said. It's a Miami stack. Josh Jacobs and Packers defense, good. 60% owned Kareem Hunt, awesome. Right. 22% owned Jackson Smith-Njigba with Trey McBride on the comeback, and then CeeDee Lamb, who projected better than Tyreek Hill. You didn't have to get super crazy. This lineup crushed.
There's a 206 lineup. I mean, like, dude, like you replace Kareem Hunt with Bucky Irving, and I mean, like you didn't even need to do any. Like, CeeDee Lamb scored 16 points at 7,300. Like, you could have just left money on the table and put Jacoby Myers in there and actually scored more points.
Yeah,
right. I mean, look at the ownership. The ownership on this. Waddle was, and Jacobs was single digit owned. CeeDee Lamb was single digit owned. I mean, like, this lineup is fine. I mean, truthfully, this lineup could actually be slightly over leveraged.
Absolutely.
That instead of playing CeeDee Lamb, you could have played like Nico Collins and went down to. I mean, whatever. I'm just saying in general, you could have, instead of playing Jackson Smith and Jigba, you could have just played Cortland Sutton in this lineup.
Yep.
Right. So if you would have replaced Smith and Jigba with Sutton and CeeDee Lamb with Nico Collins, you would have scored even more points. I mean, and you would have been chalkier. You would have been way chalkier also. And you didn't even need to do that. And you got $100,000. I mean, like, look, you had Kareem Hunt's 11 points and you won. Right. I mean,
yep. That's absolutely right. Like this. And that's why this guy right here, this 60% owned player, this is not the reason why you're winning GPPs. The reason why you're winning GPPs is this guy and this combination, this Miami stack surrounded by Jackson Smith-Njigba and Kareem Hunt and ownership, right? That's how you build a GPP lineup. I agree with you that I think this was a little bit over-levered. I think it was a little bit over-levered. Like,
not absurdly so. I think this lineup. Right, of course, I played a similar lineup, similar to this, but just, of course, I have Tyreek Hill and Jonnu Smith instead of Waddle and Jonnu Smith. But I mean, this is how most of my lineup did. Truthfully, other than CeeDee Lamb, I didn't play CeeDee Lamb, but I mean, this is how most of my lineups look like. It's just that you need the right combination. Like, I have a lineup that looks like this, but instead of Josh Jacobs in this spot, instead of Kareem Hunt in this spot, it's Brian Robinson. Right, instead of Trey McBride in this spot, it's Cortland Sutton. Right. Because it's like if I already had a 4% on Waddle and an 8% on Lamb, it's like I'm just going to play the Chalk Sutton $5,800 guy, and just I already have all the leverage I need.
Let me ask you a question. When you are building out your lineups, are you aiming for a certain ownership range?
No,
you're not. I usually aim.
What I will do is I will see what the ownership sum of the chalkiest lineups. What are they? And then I'll run 20 points, 20 ownership points below, and just keep on going 20, just to see what the lineups look like. I'm not using any of these lineups. I just want to see what these lineups look like and just get a general heuristic on like where I should be, because really it's not ownership sum. You really should be doing kind of like a geometric mean based ownership. But I'm running it through a simulation tool anyway. So like it's already taken care of that for me, but I just want to get a sense of what do these lineups look like? What do lineups that have Hunt, if I'm going to play a Brian Robinson HN lineup with all 3 chalk running backs, how much what do my wide receivers look like? Can I even play Cortland Sutton in that lineup? Can I even play Jacoby Myers what does that look like? And then I take a look at, how about if I play Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, and no Kareem Hunt? Like, do I need to play Sutton and Myers in those lineups? So I'm just doing research looking at that. And then once I get a sense of like what this looks like, then I go, okay, now I'm essentially hand building my lineups. I run 300 of a stack type. I go, I'm going to play Geno Smith doubles, right? Right. And I know I'm playing JSN and Metcalf, and I just lock those three in and put a general ownership range, and I just go run it. Right. And I go like 3 unique players or something just to get, I'm only picking one of these lineups, but I'm running 300. I'm just getting 300 of them. And I'm just like, okay, let's look at all the way the projection at the bottom. Okay, I don't want any of those. Let's see the highest own. And then I just pick one. I was like, okay, that looks pretty good. So, oh, this looks good, but I'd rather play this wide receiver over that wide receiver, just with a 1 point difference. Okay, I'm done. That's kind of what it is. But the main point is looking at the Sims as far as how does the lineup construction look like with what I intend on doing. And the Sims basically corroborated the fact that I was getting a lot more double wide receiver combinations with stacks and over correlation, even like triple stacks, more than like just single stacks and run backs and stuff like that, because the wide receiver pricing was just, it's like, feel free to play any of these 30 wide receivers in any combination you want, because that's like, they're all about efficiently priced within a point of each other with the salary adjusted value plus minus. So it's like, okay, so I'm going to play the chalk wide receiver in lineups where I have a contrarian running back. And in the lineups that I don't have a contrarian running back, I'm going to have to play a contrarian wide receiver. But and then I'm just playing stacks of teams that have the height. Like, it's not complicated. Like, I'm not playing a Cooper Rush stack. If that beats me, so be it. I'm not playing teams not playing Tommy DeVito, Malik Neighbors lineups. Right? When I'm only playing 7. If I'm playing 150, I'll have a bit of everything. But for the most part, like, what teams are going to score a lot of touchdowns? Right? Jaden Daniels, Noah Brown, Zach Ertz. Give it to me. Okay, done. Right? And I didn't. Well, what about McLaurin? You could have played McLaurin. McLaurin actually projected way worse. So I didn't necessarily want to play him, but just keeping to that. But like that Tua lineup that you had on the screen, it's like, dude, that's kind of what my lineups look like.
Yeah. I asked the question because I do like to aim for a specific. I try to aim between 90 and 120% some ownership when I'm looking at smaller fields. Larger fields.
It also depends on the slate. Sometimes we have these slates. Like, let's say Kareem Hunt was 4K, and let's say Brian Robinson was 4K. Let's say we get like whatever. Let's say Cortland Sutton was $3,200 by accident.
There's a massive difference in ownership. Sure.
Right. Well, you're going to get now you're going to get, these players are going to be 60-70% owned. So just by default, like the minimum ownership of your lineups is going to be like 140 with both of them there. So you can't go, if you went 90 to 120, you'd have lineups that are absurdly low owned in comparison to the projection of these players.
No, totally right. Yeah.
So you can't just use a number for every slate, right?
No. As a rule of thumb, I'll put it that way. A rule of thumb, 90 to 120.
I think a better way is to compare it to the optimal.
Sure. Yeah. And if you
run the optimal and you go, okay, the optimal is 146 point, whatever the hell. And you're like, okay, I want my max to be 120, like 25 point in ownership below that as my max. And sometimes the optimal is, like an NBA. Dude, the optimal could have a total ownership of 270% owned because there's 3 guys on the slate that's 70% owned that you have to play. And then you go like, okay, how do I get different? Well, I want to be, instead of 270, I want to be like 220. Right.
Yeah. Like, and admittedly, I don't even think about ownership in that way for NBA. I think I only really do it for NFL. I'm not sure why. Maybe I should stop doing that. I mean, compared to the optimal, I think in every sport you should compare to the optimal. You should absolutely do that. But from an ownership perspective, maybe I should stop doing that in NFL. No. Anyway, if anybody got any questions, take some for a little while. I thought that this slate was fun to build for. It was a pretty good slate. It was fun to break down. I thought that The matchups were fun. We didn't have anything that was, a huge priority. I think that people prioritized a lot of different things. Like you said, wide receiver projections were within like 1 point of value prop. And I think that made it so you had kind of a choose your own adventure type of slate, which is fun to build for. I do think that slates like this are harder to, I think they're harder to win for me, for a player like me, because there wasn't any like very clear, I can get away from this spot or I can find leverage on this spot. There weren't very many clear paths towards relative value or leverage. So I thought this slate was kind of hard for me to experience any EV on, just from the player that I am. But I thought that it was fun to build for.
I mean, I made money. I don't care about fun. I care about making money.
You and I are so different on that. I like skill expression. I like being able to figure out the puzzle.
I like skill expression also, but I'm perfectly fine with just sometimes doing the simple things.
Yeah.
Right. I don't mind doing the boring stuff and be like, okay, well, I'm just here's my cash game lineup and take advantage of idiots, right?
Yeah.
That don't, for whatever reason, don't know how to build. And not late swap and not swap when I know that I shouldn't be swapping.
Yeah. We talked about late swap.
You listen to the Gilcast, the fucking schmucks over there fucking swapped into fucking nothing. And if they would have stayed put, they would have fucking won.
What do they swap off of?
They literally Davis and Sammy both had my lineup. And they swapped the three receivers because Luke Schoonmaker had a touchdown and he was only 2,500, and they thought they were so far behind playing Kelsey in that spot. And I just left my Sutton, Myers, JSN lineup, and they switched to like Dobbs, Metcalf, something like that. They fucking, I mean, they got crushed. I mean, no Myers. I mean,
well, of course they fucking. You're not trying to win the double up.
No, they thought they were so far behind that everyone like if I go, I'm going to go to the massive $25 double.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to take a look here. Okay. So in the massive $25 double up, Schoonmaker was 38% owned. Okay. So fine. But I mean, it's not like Kelsey didn't score any points. Kelsey scored about the same point, 12 points. Right?
Right.
So, Jacoby. Okay. So here are the three players in question that they swapped off from. Cortland Sutton, 65% owned. Jacoby Myers, 34% owned. JSN, 29% owned. Now, that sounds like a lot. Like, Cortland Sutton is 65% owned. It's like, in order to make up ground, you gotta fade Cortland Sutton. It's like, this also means that 35% of the field didn't play Cortland Sutton.
Right.
In cash games on this slate. Kareem Hunt was 82.8% owned. That means that there was 17% of people that didn't play Kareem Hunt at $5,700 in a double up.
Right.
Okay. That means Brian Robinson was 60% owned. 40% of people did not play him in the, like, dude, there are people that are owned that shouldn't have been owned at all. And you like there's so many of those lineups. 7% of the double up played Joe Mixon at 8K.
Right.
8% played Josh Downs at 62. 8% of people in cash games played Josh Downs. Downs, for crying out loud.
Probably paired with Anthony Richardson, I would guess. Which is even worse. Right.
19% of the field played Amon-Ra St. Brown, which I didn't think it was a bad play, but he only got 12 points.
And he was 8,300, and you didn't need him.
22% of the field played James Conner, and he scored 9 points. 24% of the field played Hunter Henry. Like, they're worried about, Schoonmaker did well. It's like, well, a quarter of the field played Hunter Henry, and Hunter Henry only got 9 points.
And also,
24% of the field played Nico Collins, and he got 20 at 7,600. But, I mean, you have three receivers all. I mean, like, you have JSN, you have Myers, and you have Sutton in your lineup. It's just like, once you start adding up, like all the, like, ownership, like, Kayshon Boutte at 3,500 was 5.6% owned. Okay? Tyrone Tracy was 4.9% owned. This is double ups. I'm not talking about GPPs. I'm talking about double ups, right? So you take a look. Sam Laporta was 3.7% on all these guys that underperformed and whatever. Like, just have all of these guys in here. It's like, yeah, but Cortland Sutton 65, Myers 34, JSN 29. All you have to do is get to the top 55th percentile. There's enough lineups that don't contain any of these guys that you could easily get there.
Right. I was just going to say, of the 38% of people that had Luke Schoonmaker, how many of them also probably had, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who you needed to have Schoonmaker in order to make it work? It's just, and on top of that, 38% of the field means that there's still equity between that and the 55th percentile that you have to hit in order to cash. Like you still have wiggle room. Even if Schoonmaker nuked, there's still room there. And two, even if you say, oh, Luke Schoonmaker had a touchdown, you're going to swap off 3 players for that?
Now, it's not like that. If Schoonmaker had 30 fantasy points, okay, then now I get it.
If he has 30 fantasy points,
14 and a half, who cares?
No, even if he has 30 fantasy points, you just get off of Sutton, or you just get off. Like you don't blow up 200 points of ownership so that you could. That's insane.
It makes for a fun listen to a podcast. I'm glad they did it for the bit. I'm good for the bit.
I guess I don't know, man. I think that's silly. I'm glad that those guys play cash games though, because it gives you money, Jordan. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. We do have one question here specifically. Any merit to discussing Waddle as a pivot since we knew Tyreek was going to get steamed and Waddle was the lowest owned piece of a high projected, somewhat chalky team stack? We didn't know that Tyreek was going to get that much steam. I don't think that there was a way to know that he was going to get that much steam. And that kind of goes back to the whole like contest sims and optimal ownership and all that kind of stuff. Like he was a neutral play at 15% owned. It was a bad play at 25% owned. But we didn't know, even if you thought that he was going to get steamed a little bit, even if you thought that he was going to come up a bit to like 20%, I don't think that that's the way that you think about it. I don't think you think, oh, Tyreek Hill is going to be 5% over owned, so I'm going to get off of him for Waddle. I think that instead you look at Waddle at his price tag and say, if Jacoby Myers is going to be 20% owned, I can play Jalen Waddle in my Miami stack and get leverage off of that. I don't think that it's necessarily a Tyreek versus Jalen Waddle thing. I also think that with the way that Tyreek Hill was projected, there was nothing wrong with getting off of him for Waddle just as a play in the stack. Like the priority of Miami stacks was Jonnu Smith. It wasn't Tyreek Hill. People played Tyreek Hill, but the priority in the contest sims and in the projections and in basically any projection set that you looked at, it was Jonnu Smith as the priority. So I think you could have made the decision between Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But I don't think that it was because you were going to get leverage off of people who played Tyreek Hill. I just think that it was a straight 1v1 based on value prop.
And then Jalen Waddle, also he hasn't shown it. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, if you're playing Jalen Waddle as like a one-off or something like that, and what makes him any different than Jacoby Myers? I mean, like I'm just talking about from a range of outcomes type of thing. Obviously, the Dolphins are a better team than the Raiders. But I'm just saying, like, I can understand why people like. When's the last time Jalen Waddle put up 31 fantasy points?
Jalen Waddle, not this year,
right? Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, dude, Jalen Waddle for most of this year has not gotten like more than fucking 4 targets.
Yeah, I mean, it was career high stuff. But right. to be, this goes back to Dean on Twitter, that conversation yesterday where he's just like, oh, well, I'm sure that Tyreek Hill will get there next week because, people will keep playing him. It's like, that's just not the way that you think about DFS. Like that's.
But he's due, James. He's due.
Some people think that way. I certainly don't think that way. It's when you think about an offense like Miami, you can throw out the entirety of 2024. I think you have to look at 2023. It's basically the same supporting cast and, same coaching staff and everything like that. So I think you just throw out all of 2024 and you say, what is the expectation if we were going to be projecting this from the beginning of 2023 up until now. And if you do that, then, all of these guys are underpriced. Jalen Waddle was underpriced. Tyreek Hill was underpriced. Devon Achane was underpriced. Like, all of these guys were underpriced. So it didn't matter which one of them you played, but the fact of the matter is you probably should have had interest in Miami stacks one way or another. If you played Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill or whoever, like, that's great. I don't think that there was any reason to play one over the other than Tyreek Hill probably has a higher ceiling within a standard deviation than Jalen Waddle. But even then, the ownership difference there was going to be pretty massive, even if Tyreek Hill came in at 15% owned. So I think you could have gone any direction on that. I think that is probably going to do it for us. This has been Mondays with McCool. I've been joined by Jordan Cooper. Man, I can't fucking talk today. This has been put on by PaterDFS.com. If you have not checked out the site, you should definitely go check out the site. We have models for NBA, NFL, NHL, NCAA F, NCAA B, all of those things. We'll have, lots of Thanksgiving slate stuff coming up. We'll have showdown and full slate stuff. So go check out PaterDFS.com. Find me over at Twitter at Patert_DFS. And Jordan, where can people find you?
Just go buy the course. Buy Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, 15-hour audio DFS masterclass, as well as the Theory of DFS for advanced players, theoryofdfs.com. Me and James's 2 courses and our Excel tools.
I'll get it up on the screen eventually. There we go. I need to load this up right in the beginning. But yeah, go buy Theory of DFS. Evergreen course. You can use it forever. It still applies to things today.
It's all the stuff we talked. I mean, it's literally all the stuff we talked. Like, what are heuristics on what a proper plus EV lineups look like?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Maybe we should put out Theory of Sims. We should put out Theory of Contest Sims.
Well, the Sims are the ones that are making the calculations of the same concepts.
I know. It's just a joke. Just a joke. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate y'all. And we will talk to you next week on Mondays with McCool.